Hi everybody, in this video we're talking about where to save and where to spend when shopping for sewing supplies. Sewing is an awesome hobby, but it can seem a little cost prohibitive to beginners. So I've taken my list of must-have sewing supplies and broken them down into where you should spend money and where you can be a little more thrifty and save on things. Number one on the list is where most new sewers would see as the most cost-prohibitive part of starting sewing, but I think that a sewing machine is actually somewhere you should save money. It's true you could skip out on buying a machine and just stick with hand sewing, but I think that machine sewing allows you to progress faster as a beginner because you don't spend so much time actually sewing and you learn new techniques faster. There are machines out there that cost thousands of dollars, but they have features that even most advanced sewists never use. A quality new machine can be bought for under $200, and if you go the used or vintage route, you can find a really quality machine for under $100. If you do go the used or vintage route, make sure that you take the machine to a machine shop, sometimes even before you buy it to make sure that it's in good working condition, and always remember to bring your machine in for regular maintenance so that it will last you much longer. And of course, as with any purchase, make sure you read a lot of reviews and try it before you buy it. After a sewing machine, the most used electronic component in your sewing kit should be an iron and an ironing board. And where you save money on a machine, I think that you should spend it on an iron. People have described switching to a high-quality iron as a life-changing experience because it really does make a difference in the way that your clothes press. But there's a caveat because the difference between a $15 iron and a $50 iron is a lot bigger than the difference between a $50 iron and a $100 iron. I think that $30 to $50 is a great price to spend on an iron. Just make sure you're looking for an iron that is heavy, has a non-stick plate, has separate buttons for steam and spraying water, and has separate steam and temperature controls. If you're using an iron, you should also be using an ironing board, not something like a towel on the floor, but an actual ironing board. And I think that it's worthwhile to spend a little more on an ironing board too. I wish that I had bought the $40 ironing board instead of the $15 ironing board at Bed Bath & Beyond. Because my ironing board is so cheap and rickety, I'm honestly afraid that my iron is going to fall off of it all the time. I'm actually planning on spending less than $40 though to convert the surface of an old dresser into an ironing table. And that's somewhere that you can save a little bit of money if you have the ability or a piece of furniture that you can convert into an ironing table. But if you don't have that ability or the space to keep something like that, definitely spend a little more on an ironing board and open it up in the store to test for sturdiness. If you only know one thing about sewing as a hobby, it's probably that sewists have a little bit of an obsession with their sewing scissors. Often memed, it's true because sewing scissors need to stay sharp in order to cut fabric effectively, and nothing dulls scissors faster than cutting paper with them. So, as you can probably guess, this item would be a spend, but again, you don't have to go out and spend $100 on a pair of Japanese scissors. Spending $25 on a dedicated pair of fabric scissors, sold as fabric scissors from a brand like Singer, Fiskars, or Geiger, will do you a lot better than just trying to find the sharpest pair of scissors out of your kitchen junk drawer. I know that it seems like everything on this list is a spend, and there's definitely people out there who would tell you to spend on everything so that you make sure you have the most quality items, but I've got some saves for you next. The next item on the list is patterns, and this one is a save. Sure, you could go the ultimate cost-saving route and draft your own patterns, but for beginners, patterns offer a wealth of information in terms of garment construction and what flat garments look like as flat pieces. Luckily, the big pattern companies often have sales at places like Hobby Lobby and Joann's, sometimes for as cheap as 99 cents a piece, so make sure you stock up on sales like that. Many independent pattern companies offer at least one free pattern in order to get you to try their patterns, and that's another great place to start. Not all free patterns are created equal, so make sure you read the reviews before you make something. I know I have a really hard time spending $20 on a pattern unless I know that it's going to work well for me, so wait to buy more expensive patterns until you're more confident with your skill set. If you've got a pattern, you're definitely going to need some fabric, and fabric can be the largest cost of a sewing hobby. Fabric, especially for a beginner, should and can be a save. You shouldn't be spending a lot of money on fabric because you're just going to cut it and wind up throwing a lot of it away. Remember that online fabric stores exist, and they're often much cheaper than in-person fabric stores such as Joann's. If you do have to shop for fabric at an in-person store like Joann's or Hobby Lobby, make sure you always bring a coupon with you. And yes, I'm that person who will go to the fabric store every day so that I can use my 40% off coupon on every piece of fabric that I buy. If you live near a major city, check out if they have a garment district or not, because you can find some great prices on fabric in garment districts. Everyone knows about New York City and Los Angeles garment districts, but did you know that Washington, D.C. actually has an amazing selection of fabric stores? Lastly, don't discount unconventional sources of fabric. Thrift stores can be great sources of fabric in the form of bed sheets and curtains. The next item every sewer should have is a collection of rulers and measuring tape. This isn't a spend just because it's related to sewing, but the more money you spend on a ruler, it's likely the more money the factory which made the ruler spent on quality control and precision. Cheap measuring tapes made of plastic can stretch and warp over time, so they won't give you accurate measurements. This measuring tape has fiberglass in it to ensure that it doesn't stretch, and it was actually my mom's, and it's still perfectly accurate, and I use it every day. You can find lots of good, clear plastic sewing rulers online, and they're really not that expensive. You just shouldn't go and grab the ruler out of your child's school supplies. As a beginner, I think that having a measuring tape, a flexible 2x18 clear gridded ruler, and a rigid 6x24 plastic ruler will give you a good variety of rulers, and you don't really need much more than that. You won't really need things like French curves and T-squares until you're drafting your own patterns, so this can be purchased later. If you're sewing following a pattern, some sort of marking tool is going to be really useful for you, but some dedicated fabric marking tools such as disappearing ink markers and tailor's chalk can be really expensive. If you are like me and trace your patterns onto sturdier paper, I really like using cheap sidewalk chalk to transfer my patterns to my fabric, and it brushes off quickly and is designed not to stain your clothes. I've also heard of people using things like washable magic markers to transfer markings to patterns, but I haven't tested it yet. If you're going to sew some fabric together, then you're going to need thread. And thread is another area where I think you should spend, but you don't have to go out and spend the most money possible. Really cheap thread, like the 50-cent spools you can buy at Walmart, is really weak and breakable, and it also gives off a lot of lint, so it doesn't give you quality sewing. But you don't have to go out and buy a full selection of Gutermann threads online. Threads from Coats & Clark and Hobby Lobby's Sewology brand are really strong and do a great job from a mid-price option. The last essential sewing supply everyone should have are pins. Pins hold your fabric together and stop it from slipping while you're sewing, so it's really important, especially if you're a beginner and not used to manipulating fabric in a machine yet. Cheap pins, again, come from manufacturers which don't have very good quality control, so many of them are blunt or have rough edges and can damage your fabric. Spending a little more money on a recognizable brand of pins will serve you a lot better. Pins aren't super expensive, but again, just don't go for the cheapest option. That's it for my list of products you should save or spend on when building a sewing kit. In the comments below, tell me what items you think should be a save or a spend, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for new videos like this every week.